"You don't look so good, boss." David was ashen and drenched in sweat. He'd stopped singing altogether as we wound up the song Reality, a favorite of mine off the new record. We'd only been on for about half an hour. It was blisteringly hot on stage, barely any air. But something wasn't right. We all felt it. You could see it in the faces of the crowd. David's eyes caught mine as he hunched over. 15,000 pairs of eyes staring at us melted away as I called over to the side of the stage where David's security guy, Nick Belshaw, stood watching, his expression a picture of concern. In a flash, Nick rushed him off stage. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it wasn't good. We soldiered on with a couple of tracks without him, a new career in a new town, Be My Wife, before David managed to come back on stage. We played a few more songs. Nick brought him a stool. After the first few chords of Changes, he couldn't continue. David always gave everything to a performance. Some nights he'd even come off stage and puke in a bucket from the exertion. But this was nothing like that. Up until that point, things had been going really well. We were about to wrap up the biggest tour David had ever embarked on, and everybody was in great spirits. The reality tour had been grueling but fun, too. It was my 5th outing with him, over the 30 years since we first played together on the Diamond Dogs tour, and we were working our asses off, especially David. But it was one of the best times of my life, and I think that was true for David, too. He seemed happier and healthier than I'd ever seen him, and relaxed in a way that he'd never been before with the band and the crew, and most especially the fans, who greeted us with a rapturous welcome everywhere we went. By the time we hit Prague, the band had played over 100 shows since the tour began on 7th of October 2003 in Copenhagen, Denmark. Over 9 months, we had crisscrossed Europe and America through 2003 and into 2004 before heading to Asia, then back to the U.S., finally winding up in Europe again. After David left the stage in Prague, we got back to the hotel in short order. Not hearing shit, even from the tour manager, Frank Enfield, I started to worry. When I caught up with Frank later, he looked serious, and that was my first tip-off that things might be worse than anyone was letting on. Frank was normally an easy-going guy. He said an ambulance had taken David away, but assured me everything is going to be okay. I raised my eyebrows and gave him the look. That's when he told me David had a blocked nerve. "What the hell does that mean?" I asked. I'd never heard that term before. Frank shrugged and said, "Be ready to head for the next gig." We were due to play in Hamburg at the Hurricane Festival 2 days later, on the 25th of June, 2004. At first, things seemed like business as usual in Hamburg, although I couldn't help wondering about David's health. The dressing room was damp and cold. Outside, a downpour had turned the outdoor arena into a typical German mudfest. Backstage, David was sitting in a chair with his eyes closed. He looked like a bat the way he was all folded up. He'd been sitting there for a while, real quiet, and he sure didn't look himself. "You okay, boss?" I asked him. "I'm not feeling great. Maybe the rain," he mumbled, waving me off. He didn't make eye contact, and it seemed as though he could barely talk. Everybody was quiet. There was none of the usual goofing around or the bullshit the band and David typically engaged in to get our collective energy up before a show. But when it was time, David got up as if strings had pulled him to his feet and headed for the stage, followed by the band. Mike Garson on piano, Jerry Leonard on guitar, Gail Ann Dorsey on bass, Sterling Campbell on drums, Catherine Russell on keyboards, and little old me on lead guitar. After playing so many shows, we had become an unbelievably tight unit and knew what to expect from each other on stage. As I took my usual spot to David's right, I got a weird vibe in my bones. As the show wore on, I found myself keeping an eye on him, not to watch for the usual musical cues, but just to make sure he was all right.